Okay, since angle A plus angle B is equal to 90, what we want to do is not have two different angles, angle A and angle B. We just want to have one. So we're going to solve for either A or B. In this case, we're going to solve for B. So that means we're going to subtract A from both sides and get B is equal to 90 degrees minus A. So what we're going to do is we're going to take B is equal to 90 minus A, and we're going to plug that back in to this equation right here. So now what we'll have is sine of A is equal to cosine of 90 minus A. This right here is a cofunction identity. Okay, so sine goes with cosine, and you can switch them around. Secant goes with cosecant, you can switch them around. And tangent goes with cotangent, and you can switch them around. Now all of these 90 degrees right here can also be switched to pi over 2, just going from degrees to radians. Okay, so what this actually means is if you take the two angles and if they add up to 90 like they do right here, and you're talking about sine with cosine and secant with cosecant and tangent with cotangent, then they will be equal to each other. Kind of like we saw here. So sine of 30 was equal to a half. Well then, cosine of, let's see, we had it back here, 60 is also a half. So 60 plus 30, that gives us 90. Okay, we also had sine of 60, let's see, not that one. Here it is. Sine of 45 was square root of 2 over 2, and cosine of 45 was square root of 2 over 2. Now 45 plus 45 gives you 90, okay? All right, now if we look at this one right here, use cofunctions of complementary angles to find cosine of 34 is equal to sine of what? Well, we know that this plus this have got to equal to 90, so that's why we set it up like this. I'm trying to find theta, so I subtract 34 from both sides like you do here, and you get theta is supposed to be 56. Therefore, cosine of 34 is equal to sine of 56. And if you plug this into your calculator, by the way, make sure you are in degrees. If you do this in radians, you're going to get different answers here. If you plug this into your calculator and you're in degrees, cosine of 34 is about 0.8290. Sine of 56 is about the same thing as 0.8290. Okay, so these two things would be cofunctions of complementary angles. Okay, now if we look at this one right here, so we're trying to find theta again. So if we take pi over 4 plus theta, we know that's got to be equal to 90. But since we're working with radians, pi over 2. Now I'm going to subtract this pi over 4 from both sides. And we're going to get theta is equal to pi over 2 minus pi over 4. Now I need to get the denominators the same. They both need to be 4, so I'm going to multiply this by a 2 over 2. 2 over 2. I was trying to use a different color, but that's not really working. Let me go back. 2 divided by 2. Okay, so that'll be 2 pi over 4 minus pi over 4, which 2 pi minus pi, that is pi over 4. Okay, so theta is pi over 4. Okay, which makes sense because pi over 4 is essentially 45 degrees. 45 plus what gives us 90? Well, 45 plus 45 gives us 90. And you plug this into your calculator, and this time make sure you are in radians. Tangent of pi over 4 is 1, and cotangent of pi over 4 is also 1. Okay, switch gears just a little bit. We're going to use the definition of trig functions of any angle. So we're going to use a calculator to find the length of each side to 4 decimal places. Okay, so the first one, we're going to find A. And this is the information that they give us right here within this triangle. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find this side right here. Now what they give me is this angle and this side. Okay, so according to this angle right here, this side is opposite to it, while this side is adjacent, and this side is hypotenuse. So this is opposite, this is adjacent, and this is the hypotenuse, because it is straight across from a right angle. Okay, so what I have essentially is, if I'm trying to find A, and the only other thing or information I have is opposite, what I could do is, we'll say blank of 62 is equal to, say we do opposite over adjacent. Now which trig function would that be, opposite over adjacent? That would be tangent. So I need tangent of 62 is equal to opposite over adjacent, and we know what the opposite side is. That is 10, and what we're looking for is the adjacent, which they call that A. Okay, so since I'm solving for A, I'm going to multiply both sides by A. Cancel out here, so now I've got A tangent of 62 is equal to 10. Then I'm going to divide both sides by tangent of 62. I'm going to enter that into my calculator and go 4 decimal places. So A is roughly equal to 5.3171. Okay, so there's A. Okay, to find C, we'll do the same thing. We'll go through the same thing. We've got, now we're looking for the hypotenuse. Okay, so, and the only other thing that we have that's given to us, I wouldn't use a number that we've calculated, because if we've made a mistake and then we use that to find another variable, then we have 2 mistakes then. So try to use what they give you in the formula if you can. So, but in this case you can. So the things that I have now would be opposite and hypotenuse. So we're going to say blank of 62 is equal to opposite over the hypotenuse. Well, that's got to be sine. Okay, and we know that the opposite is 10, and hypotenuse, they say, is C. So same thing, I'm going to multiply both sides by C. Cancels out here. And then I'll have C times sine of 62 is equal to 10. Divide both sides by sine of 62. So now I've got C is equal to 10 sine of 62. Make sure you're in degrees for both of these. Okay, so this would be roughly around 11.3257. And there's your answers. Okay, now let's talk about using right triangle trig to solve applied problems. Now we need to talk about the angle of elevation and the angle of depression. Okay, so the angle of elevation of an object above an observer related to the observer is the angle between the horizontal and the line of sight. The angle of depression of an object below an observer related to the observer is the angle between the horizontal and the line of sight. Okay, notice the angle is always between the horizontal and the line of sight. Okay, so this is how I remember it. If you are here on the ground and you're looking to this point up here, well, you have to look up, right, to see this point up here. So that's angle of elevation. Now if you are up here, This person up here hanging on. And you're trying to see this point down here. Well, you have to look down, so that'd be an angle of depression. You're depressed because you're looking down, okay? Now let's look at this one right here. A person walks to a point 30 feet from the base of a tree. Okay, so from this point to this point, that's the base of the tree, 30 feet away, okay? He or she measures an angle of 57 degrees between the line of sight and the top of the tree and the ground. So that would be the angle of elevation because you're having to look up. It says between the top of the tree and the ground. Top of the tree, ground. This person here has to look up, or elevate their head. So angle of elevation. So we're trying to find the height of the tree to 1 decimal place. Okay, so we are going to call this Y, like I said here. Now, this tree should be perpendicular to the ground. We'll assume that it is perpendicular to the ground, so it's forming a 90-degree angle with the ground. Okay, so that means that if we're in a right triangle, then we can use our trig functions. So what we're trying to find out is Y. What they give us is 57 degrees and 30 feet, which in relation to the 57, this side is adjacent, this side is opposite. And we don't need to find the hypotenuse. Number one, they don't give us that, and that's not what they're asking us for. So we have the opposite side and we have the adjacent side. So we'll say blank of 57 degrees is equal to opposite over adjacent. Okay, now this would be tangent. Now if you had done adjacent over opposite, that would be cotangent. That is not a function on your calculator. You have to do a couple more steps, so this is a little bit easier to work with. Okay, try to use sine, cosine, or tangent on your calculator when you can. Okay, so we know that opposite, we're calling that Y. And adjacent is 30 feet. Okay, so I need to multiply both sides by 30 feet. So that'll give me 30 feet times tangent of 57 is equal to Y. Okay, so Y will be roughly around, and by the way, make sure you're in degrees, okay, 46.2 feet. And that will be your final answer.